Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer and career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. From career struggles and anxiety to feeling like nothing is ever going to work out, I'm here to explore all the messy stuff that breaks us down and builds us up. So join me as we transform ourselves and finally ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It is not often you get to speak with someone who was a pilot and then became a photographer, and that's what we have for you today. Let me introduce you to David Enloe. He is a Marin and San Francisco family photographer who traded the cockpit for the coastline. After years in aviation, a career that looked adventurous from the outside but proved toxic on the inside, he walked away to build a practice rooted in presence, connection, and creativity. Today, David photographs families across the San Francisco Bay Area in the places that feel most alive: fog rolling over Ocean Beach, golden light in the Marin headlands, and the deep magic of coastal redwood forests. Blending digital with vintage film cameras, his images feel less posed and more like memory itself. And through his brand, The Enloe Creative, David hand-builds picture frames from upcycled local wood, giving families not just photographs, but heirlooms that hold their story. Let's dive into this conversation. I absolutely loved it. Welcome, David. I'm thrilled to have you on this show today.
Thanks for having me here. This is awesome. Like I just mentioned before we jumped into the recording, I've had the chance over the past few months to dive into your podcast, and I love it, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and your story is so different. You messaged me, and as soon as I heard and read a little bit about you, I think the listeners, they're just going to love this, because talk about doing a 180. Your life is very different than it was probably not too long ago.
Very, very different. Yes. About 3 to 5 years ago, depending on how you count, things were really different. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you just back us up right to kind of what you were doing in your career when you were, graduating high school, thinking about what you wanted to be when you grew up, and where did you go from there?
Sure. Yeah. Coming out of high school, I think if you had asked me then, I would have said I'm going to be a professional surfer. So there was a phase there, but that ended pretty soon after I got to college and realized that wasn't a reality for me. I was a good student. Like, math and science always came easy to me, and so I just kind of followed what I was good at. What I got positive feedback for, and so long story short, I ended up with an engineering degree coming out of college. But by the time I graduated, and honestly a year before that at least, I already knew I had no interest in actually being an engineer. I just didn't know what else I was going to do, or what other degree would be a better choice. So I stuck with it. I had this idea that I was going to transition and go to medical school. So I completed all the prerequisites. I applied. I literally even paid a deposit at a medical school. They're not very big deposits, but I paid a medical school some money at some point, and then very last minute made my first 180-degree turn, which was, first and foremost, to not become a doctor. I think I had the good sense that was like a little too rigid of a path for me, and something I liked the idea of, but I wasn't in love with enough, for all the work that's entailed. Anyway, I grew up a little bit around aviation. One of my friends, to back up even farther, my best friend in high school, his parents flew helicopters, and they had started a helicopter company where I grew up. And so I was exposed to aviation, and I had always known that I kind of had a potential job waiting for me with them at their company if I ever decided I wanted to fly helicopters. And at that moment, I was like, well, I'm just going to learn to fly helicopters. And so that's what I did. And I didn't have any, long-term vision of what that was going to look like. But I learned to fly helicopters, and along the way, I learned to fly airplanes. And that led to a whole smattering of different types of employment within aviation. I never did the airline thing, which is kind of like this world of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know before we recorded, you had mentioned you at one point knew someone I think in that world. And yes, it's a real world. I didn't dive into that. I knew I wasn't quite cut out for it, or maybe I just knew that aviation wasn't the one, and so I didn't want to invest that kind of energy into it. But I flew private jets and helicopters to private islands, and then I flew air ambulance for a while out in the desert in Nevada. And I spent a lot of time teaching people to fly. And I think kind of the moment when I realized aviation wasn't actually for me was when I realized I liked the teaching more than the flying. It was
Mm.
like my favorite job was actually teaching, which is kind of a low tier job within aviation, believe it or not. But I loved it. But I realized it wasn't the flying I loved. I loved working with people and teaching and certain elements of teaching. So at some point, aviation just became too stressful. And I'm sure we'll dive deeper into that, but it became too stressful, too much, and it was just it was kind of a self-actualization journey. Like aviation taught me a lot of things about myself, taught me a lot of things that I don't want in a career, and I finally realized that aviation was kind of the opposite of what I really needed, and so slowly but surely worked my way out of that. And about the time our daughter was born, or a little bit before that, I stepped out completely, and she's 2.5, so probably about 3 years ago now, I stepped completely into my current role, which is owner of the Enloe Creative. And so I'm a family and couples photographer here in Marin and the San Francisco Bay Area. And there are a number of other facets to my business that we may or may not dive into, but that's the heart and soul of it.
Yeah, and so you have this creative business now, and this is a huge reason why I wanted to have you on the show because we do talk to a lot of creatives. We have a lot of creatives who listen to it. But you literally flew planes and helicopters, and I love how you're just like, "I learned how to fly a helicopter, and I just learned how to fly a plane." And some of us are listening going, "Okay, like, I can't even imagine that in a million years." And that I love talking to people, and I'll watch a documentary on anybody who's doing something that I personally cannot imagine doing because it's so far out of my reality, and I don't have any of the skills necessary to do that job at all. But it sounds like you were able to lean into that aviation career pretty easily because you had the math skills, you had the engineer brain, and anyone who has the engineer brain has got it's a specific kind of brain, let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was a good fit on paper, at least at that time. That was actually a career that was not even adjacent to engineering, but where what I learned as an engineer was fairly applicable. Like
Mhm.
I could sit down with a manual of a helicopter and airplane and I could learn about the machine. I could learn the physics pretty quickly. So that stuff, the book learning came pretty easily. And probably the fun part the part that really got me excited in high school about flying helicopters was just the challenge of actually learning to fly a helicopter. Like, it's quite challenging, it's
Yeah.
quite hard, um, from a physical perspective, but that, of course, that fades pretty quickly. Like, there are always challenges, but the reality of aviation most of the time is you're trying to fly safely, which means kind of reducing challenges and being well within your skill set. So, yeah, like you said, I was able to really lean into it and build a career and a business around that relatively quickly. It was hard work, but I was able to do it relatively quickly. But it was kind of once I hit the other side of the learning curve that I slowly but surely started to realize, oh, this isn't really for me. Like the learning process was great. I really enjoyed that. But the actual nuts and bolts of being a pilot, they look really different. It's an incredibly structured type of career. Not in every way. I mean, my job description, like being gone half the time and never knowing where I'm gonna be or who I'm gonna fly at certain times, like that part wasn't structured. But when you actually get in an airplane or a helicopter, like it's checklists and it's procedures. You speak to each other in a certain way. You talk on the radio in a certain way. It's like not really a creative field at all. So yeah, like I said, it taught me a lot about myself. I realized that having just being good at something wasn't necessarily an indication that you're gonna love it.
Yeah, and this has always fascinated me when I've thought about my career and talked to people about their career is kind of why and what the motivation is for going into a career that we're good at, but we don't necessarily want to do. But we think because we're good at it, we should be doing it. And it's like our natural inclinations. It is good to follow that, but sometimes you're good at something that you don't actually love doing.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people that fall into this camp. I think positive feedback is one, right? Like if I have a calculus class and I do well in it with, especially with minimal effort, that
Yeah.
positive feedback for limited effort is like, that's a cortisol cycle in the brain or whatever. Like that feels good inevitably. And I think, and this isn't, I'm sure it's also true for people who are just like obviously gifted in
Mhm.
the creative side of things. But when it's math and science and that kind of stuff, Western society, we kind of push
Yeah.
kids towards the lawyer, doctor, whatever path. And so when you have a kid who's like good at math and science, it's so easy to just kind of help them lean into that because it creates an obviously stable, um, lifelong career path that isn't necessarily true, especially for a kid who isn't as obviously gifted in the arts. Like,
Yeah.
send them that direction is what I'm trying to say. So, I I think about it a lot because I'm a parent now, and my parents they were wonderful parents. Like they were not pushy at all. They
Mhm.
would have let me they supported me in trying to become a professional surfer, which was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but even even my parents, like, there was still that undercurrent of, "Oh, you're really good at math and science." Like, my dad was a dentist. "Why don't you consider medical school?"
Yeah. It's funny, I talked to my dentist a couple months ago, and I ask everyone, like, why they became what they did when I'm interacting with them, and I said, "Why did you become a dentist?" And he goes, "Well, I didn't wanna become a doctor." And that was,
Yeah.
like, the end of the conversation. I was like, "Okay, then." So it was like there was 2 options for him, right? So, very fascinating, and listen, it would make sense that we're, kinda pushed on a path where we're good at something. We need people who are great at science and engineering and math and all that, and I was certainly pushed into the creative path. Like I was always given positive feedback when I was like in elementary school. I'd be plucked out of the class to do like creative things for the teacher. They'd be like, we need a sign or a poster. Can you make it? So, like, you start to learn. I was literally being hired to do graphic design at like 8 years old to you start to learn that you're good at these things, you're gonna get valuable feedback, people are going to appreciate you, and it's like a sense of validation that you become addicted to, and I think that makes sense. I think that's the human way. No one was saying, "Congratulations on acing your long division, like, quiz." They were more focused on the things that were obvious, right? So that pushed me into my path, and I kinda kept going, and, you just kind of go with the flow for a while.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask because, like I said, I'm a relatively new listener to your podcast. Graphic designer is your, like, creative title, if
Yeah.
I'm correct?
I would
Okay,
say
and
that. I would say I've been doing it since I was, like, 15. Like, I started training in high school for it and, did college, and I still do it. I have graphic design clients. I freelance now as opposed to working in a corporation, which I did not enjoy as much as free like, running my own show. Um, but it is, like, something I've done forever. But the thing is, there's phases in my life when I'm not doing it because 'cause I'm also a career coach, and I usually work with creatives. Um I don't necessarily miss doing design. Like, I don't sit here and go, "I just cannot wait to design a logo this weekend," or whatever it is, like, so it is something that I've, done for bigger chunks of my life and less chunks of my life, and I kind of vacillate in that world, but I'm someone who has always loved multiple things, so I never wanted to just be a graphic designer. I wanted to expand things, and that's how I started getting into personal development work.
well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Similarly, I love photography, and I was a amateur photographer before I started this business. Even when I was flying around the country in airplanes, I would like always have a little film camera with me. And in high school, I loved, the dark room and all that. But even now, January this month, when I'm not photographing really anything, I often put my cameras away. I don't even pull them out to take pictures of my family. And like, I need that break. And more so, I don't always miss it either. And it kind of leads me
Mm.
to something that I thought like I might talk about today, which was that, there are people who find the thing for their career that it's like all they want to do, but those people are so rare. It's more about finding a career, a job, a set of jobs that are like aligned with your life and your values, things that you enjoy, but also like mesh well into your life. And that aviation did not do that at all to the nth degree because I was gone all the time and it didn't work for, my life or what I wanted my life to be at all. But photography, even if clicking the shutter isn't the thing that I wanna be doing every moment of every day, the entire process, the whole business is really aligned with my values and the way I wanna live my life, and I think that's a hard thing to get to. It's a hard thing to find, but it's not something we talk a lot about in high school, you know?
You don't, and you've just articulated it so well because you're really touching on the lifestyle piece. And, I did a podcast about this, is that I had seen someone on Instagram talking about in high school, especially, or college, you're not really taught to follow the lifestyle that you want. You're really taught to follow your passions or your skills or what you're interested in. But then you build this life and you may, like, hate it, even though the actual day-to-day activities are something you love. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about there. Can you paint me a picture of what your life and your environment was like when you were in the aviation world?
Mm, yeah, and it varied a lot because I did a lot of different jobs, based out of different places, but I think probably the most telling I had 2 jobs in particular. One was, captaining a corporate jet, actually a charter jet, and then the other one was flying air ambulance, and both those jobs followed kind of a typical aviation schedule where I was gone for 7 days and then I was home for 7 days. So 7 on, 7 off. For the jet job, I was on the road. For the air ambulance job, I was based in another city, but I would sometimes be on the road. And so it was just kind of all consuming. I would like leave for work on a Tuesday morning early and I wouldn't be home until the next Tuesday night late. And along the way, I was just kind of at the whim of the company I was working for. And there are like guardrails and rules around rest and recovery and safety and whatnot. But for the most part, they could kind of do with me what they needed to, make their clients happy. And, within that world, like aviation, I think it gets a very glamorous, I don't know, aura around it, and it is true to some extent, but what people don't talk about is, like, airplanes are loud, they're noisy, and jet fuel is not good for you in airports. There's jet fuel everywhere, and the food we eat on a daily basis was really terrible, not good for your health, and we would stay in hotels every night that, maybe there would be a little gym, but, like, often there wasn't time, like, the lifestyle around it really wasn't very healthy, you didn't have much control over it, and the actual job itself is, like I kinda started saying, it's loud, it's stressful, there's a lot of risk involved, there's pressure, and specifically in the air ambulance, position, you can end up in some kind of toxic environments where the company you're working for, not surprisingly, is really trying to push you to fly more flights so that they can make more money, but they're pushing you potentially, you are expected to walk this fine line between like making more money for the company and what you can do safely and not step beyond that, but also don't leave too much gray zone in between. Like, go right up to the line, but don't push any further, because if you push any further, that's unsafe, and good pilots aren't safe. So it was an intense, environment, and there's not a lot of appreciation for the pilots, not a ton of respect for, like, their time and their health, I guess. So, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question entirely. Feel free to dig
No,
deeper on
I
that.
think you've just pulled the curtain back on, an industry that a lot of people don't understand, and it makes so much sense as you're explaining it. I was like, yeah, you're on call, you're moving around a lot. The physical environment, I always find this very interesting because, one of the things in coaching school that we learn about is, like, there's kind of 6 guiding principles that can affect us and our happiness in life. And one of them is environment. Now, there's 6 of them: and mental, spiritual, physical, environment, and I can't remember the next one. But the point is, we prioritize them differently, each of us. And for some of us, physical environment is like really high up. And for some people, it's not. You know, the person who can just like work in a cubicle with no windows, they don't care, or they can move into any apartment, it doesn't matter. But for some people, it really affects them. I'm one of those people. Like I can't work in certain environments. I have to have just my space. I'm protective of my space. And I don't like a lot of loud things. Like I can't handle a lot of stimulation externally. So let's say I'm working in a building and I've had this happen where next door there's insane construction. That disrupts me. I can't recalibrate. And I go home and I'm a total hot mess. So I
Yeah.
can't imagine, as you're describing it, I'm thinking about the physical environment that you're in and how that would be affecting you. And you're doing it all the time.
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind when you were talking about the environment and the simulation, was what I listened to as a pilot all day. Like, you have on your headset, you're completely cut off from the world around you. Even if I was flying a helicopter around the Caribbean, like, all I could hear is what was in my headset. And especially at some of those, higher level jobs, flying in busy airspaces, you're listening to just nonstop radio talk all day, and it's all important. Like, radio talk in aviation is meant to be pared down to the absolute bare minimum essential information, and it is nonstop in these busy airspaces. So yeah, I mean, I remember coming home from days, especially days where I was teaching, even though I love teaching the most, where I was interacting with both a student, and air traffic control, trying to teach them how to fly and trying to keep us both alive all day long in a little airplane that's loud, and it's rattly, and there's constant motion and turbulence. I would come home and just be absolutely wasted, like, just unable to really interact sometimes. I remember coming home and just being like, I kind of have to go sit quietly for 20 minutes before I can even eat dinner.
Even
So,
function. Yeah, I feel
yeah.
like if you're someone who's like a highly sensitive person, like an HSP, and I know a lot of people don't like labels, and I get that, but I do feel that there is that 20% of the world that falls into that category. I would
Oh, I'm
feel
right there for
I'm in
sure.
there. I feel like I'm in there. There's that great documentary called Sensitive. And I just can't imagine having that bombardment of information, sound, and noise like all day long. And
And I
it's,
didn't know that about myself,
yeah.
and aviation really taught me. And then I got out of that, and then we realized, oh, this is like, I realized that being in a city, we were living in San Francisco, was similarly affecting me. And my wife was ready to move anyway, but we moved up to a much quieter place up here in the woods, and like, that big change in environment has been huge for me. So I'm very much on board with that.
Yeah, we don't live in the city, we live on the outskirts, and when we first moved here 15 years ago, I used to joke that I called it the RC, the retirement community. It was really like all our neighbors, like literally 90 years old. Now we've grown into it, and I'm like, "This is the best thing ever." Like, I just have
Mm.
space, quiet, the trees, like, we're obsessed with
Yeah.
our nature and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're working photography. Your work is, I just have to say, so beautiful. I've worked with
Thank you.
tons of photographers and, looked at a lot of portfolios, and the family photography that you do, I know a lot of people talk about wanting natural family photography, and then you go online and it still feels like very curated or too perfect, but yours has there's an essence, there's a soul to it, that I was really enjoying looking at your work, and of course, I'll put the link below to your website. Um, Tell me how that transition came to be.
Yeah, well, first, thank you. That's high praise. I really appreciate it. When someone else looks at my portfolio and speaks like directly to what I'm after, that means a lot. So thank you. And your question was kind of how that came to be, or
Yeah,
sorry,
how
I
did you,
lost
like,
it the process.
go from pilot to photographer?
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, I have often throughout my life had a camera in my hand, and the one and only class I enjoyed in high school, like, truly, I kind of was a high school hater. I didn't really enjoy the process, but I took black and white photography, I think twice, which I'm not even sure if that was really allowed, but I was like, "No, I'm gonna petition and take this twice." And I would stay after class for, like, hours. I had this teacher who was very generous with supplies. I must have printed 500 um, photographs in those classes. But anyway, I obviously had a love of photography throughout, but it kind of got buried underneath science and math and all the other things in life. Um, and it kind of actually ended up being a pretty objective decision. Like I was in aviation, um, and it was around the time that the pandemic was happening. And my wife and I both worked in healthcare at that point. I say I worked in healthcare. I was flying an air ambulance. So I was in aviation, but I was also in healthcare. So neither of us had any time off. In fact, we were working harder and we were, um, at risk every day. Like I was flying patients in a little airplane on ventilators with COVID, and all the while, her mother was living with us with stage 4 lung cancer on active chemotherapy. And so it was like this incredibly stressful time. And I think things kind of came to a head at that point. I realized like I'm not in love with aviation, period, and I need to start working my way out now. And so that's when I began the Enloe Creative. But the process was, like I said, it was kind of objective. It was like looking at other things I could do, other things that I love. Um, I think at one point I talked about becoming a personal trainer because I enjoy that as well. And there were a few others on the list. But somehow I narrowed it down and said, I really do love photography. I think I was just the most excited about that. And I thought it seemed like a small lift to kind of give it a
Mhm.
try. Like throw up a Squarespace website. We had some neighbors who had a little toddler at the time. I was like, let's go take some pictures. Let's try this out, put them on a website, try to, a couple marketing tactics where I can get in front of some clients and just see how this all feels. And it was a lot harder than I expected to build a business, no
Mhm.
surprise.
Mhm.
But I really enjoyed it. I think the thing that tipped the scales for me was kind of as I started getting a little more educated, I started to realize that most photographers burned out about the time they realized that the business side was hard, and I actually started to thrive. Like, I was like, "Oh, I actually like the business side of this." I felt there was, like, a creativity in building my own brand, my own business that I was super excited about. So I still love the photography, but I actually love most parts of my business, like not doing taxes, and there's a few others I don't love, but most parts of my business I really, really enjoy. And so once I kind of realized that that was like possible and, within me, it really took off from there. So it's kind of just a chance happening. I kind of just gave it a try and it worked. Yeah.
Wow, and you did mention, like, a bit of a low risk to go into it. It wasn't like you didn't go back to school or do any of that. I don't know if you upgraded your camera, you got the kind of website going, but it sounds like it was something accessible. Like,
Yeah. And it
yeah,
and it is, and it's why the photography space is so
yeah.
often considered saturated. And it is at that low bottom end because it is easy to,
Mhm.
for less than $1,000, you can buy a kit that's totally ready to take pictures of families, and Squarespace is a couple $100 a year, and it's easy to make a website.
Yeah.
So it was an easy lift. Yeah.
Now, did you just, like, flat out up and quit your job and say, like, "That's it, I'm cutting ties and I'm now doing this," or was there a gradual transition?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, on paper it was gradual. I think I spent a couple years where I was still teaching in the Bay Area. I quit the air ambulance job kind of mid-pandemic, for obvious reasons. And I started teaching in the Bay Area and was really enjoying that, but also building the photography business on the side, knowing that the aviation thing wasn't my long-term plan. That said, we hit a point around about the time my mother-in-law actually passed away when things got really stressful again, where my photography business was in no way going to replace my income. It really
Mhm.
wasn't. We really needed it to be more. My wife was still in her medical residency at that point, and yet it was obvious that I couldn't do both anymore.
Mm.
So I kind of just up and jumped ship and uh, crossed my fingers. We all did in our family, and so there was a little bit of both. There was like a moment of taking a big leap,
Mhm.
but I did have some sort of a foundation already in place. And I knew enough to see that it was possible, you know?
What was the mindset like? Yeah, what was that belief? Did you like, you could sort of see it, or like, was it 80% there? Did you feel like really confident? What was the fear factor?
Ugh, it's a good question. It was high. Um, I think there's a lot of pieces. One is when you're leaving something that you know you cannot stay in,
Mm,
it it there's only so much fear you can have. Like, you're going to have to do something else. And my wife is not an entrepreneur. She's been very supportive throughout this process, but I know how challenging it's been
mhm.
for her to see this working, before it was actually working.
Yeah.
So I think for her, there was a lot of fear involved, but likewise, she didn't wanna live with a version of David that was stuck in aviation for the rest of his life either. So,
Yeah.
we all knew that something had to happen, and in that moment, it had to happen now. So, there was definitely fear. It was absolutely not 80% of the way there. It was, like, 30% of the way there. There was, like
Mm,
I I'm a I I don't consider myself a self-confident person, but when I get an idea and I see the vision in my head, when I know it's possible, when I objectively can say, "Oh, that's possible," and I'm excited about it, like, I can just convince myself of anything. And so I
mhm.
just convinced myself it was a good idea, and I went for it. And I also knew that the moment I had all my energy to put into it, things would look completely different, and they did. And so within a year or so, it was obvious that this was gonna work, and then it had potential to be way, way more than it had been in that interim state.
Yeah, that mental game of convincing yourself that it can work. I don't know if that's like 80% of the battle or 90% of it, but to me, it's so important. And that's when I will tell myself, and I tell this to other people, when you have to put blinders on, especially if there's people trying to talk you out of it, or, it sounds like you had quite a bit of support around you, but that's not often the case for everybody.
No, and I cannot try and relate to somebody who is trying to, switch out of a corporate career who's a single parent or they have
Yeah.
dependents or whatever, where it's just them and they are the sole income. I don't know what that looks or feels like. It's different for everybody, but I've always had supportive people around me.
Mhm.
And while financially, like, things weren't always easy in those interim years, like, I've always had family around that could, if needed, help out. Like, we're not going to be in extremely dire straits. And like, I don't take that lightly. That is a really, really important shoulder to be able to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's having some kind of support system, wherever it comes from, but having
Yeah.
something. Um, what is one of the things that you just love most about your lifestyle now?
Good question. I think I love a few things, but one is probably that my job pushes me to be outside a lot. And I say that as I sit here behind a computer, and I do a lot of sitting behind a computer. Um, but honestly, a lot of my sitting, I'm still my business is still growing. I still have a lot of visions that I'm kind of, working out, and my entire goal is to create a framework that gets me outside more, that gets me photographing and working with families more. And so that really is the end game. And for me, speaking of environment, that's huge. The more time I can spend outside, the better. I think flexibility is absolutely huge as well, and I say that a little bit timidly because, like, it's also a bit of a curse or a challenge.
Mhm.
My wife does not have a regularly scheduled job at all. We have kind of sporadic childcare, and my job doesn't have any structure that I don't give it, and so we've definitely fallen into periods where that flexibility has been a real challenge for us. Like, when do I work? How much should I work? How much should I work on our house, on these house projects, or on whatever else? But at the same time, that is it's a blessing. Like, the fact that I can pick up our daughter from daycare any day of the week at any time, as long as we, put it in the calendar. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Some people, again, like the environment thing, they don't really care about flexibility, and they are more suited to a 9 to 5 job or something repetitive or something like that. And I know personally I really value flexibility. Like, I just I feel like life throws so many things at you. I need that flexibility to deal with family stuff, whatever it is like that. I don't know. I get so excited sometimes that I can put a load of laundry on in the middle of the day, you know? Just like there's small
Yeah.
things too that feel like such a lifestyle win that comes with the flexibility. And for me, that's mainly working from home. And it's different for everybody, but I think it's so important to get in touch with what is of core value, what is of importance to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could probably use, like, a little more rhythm and routine around here, but I've actually I thought about this the other day. I have never worked a Monday through Friday job in my life, and I am terrified of the idea.
I
Um,
and you know what? I'm glad you haven't because you don't need to experience that in this lifetime. I know my one of my chiropractors, she's like never had a corporate job and I was like, "I love this for you." Like I'm fascinated by people who have never actually worked a corporate job. I need to have more of them on because it's a different perspective. We get sucked into this belief that that's really the path we need to go on.
yeah. Yeah, and it's I mean, it's complicated, like, with
Mm.
having a kid that has a school schedule and, I work more on weekends than I do on weekdays, and, like, there's definitely complexity involved, but on the flip side, a few weeks ago, it's just a random example, but there are these incredibly beautiful little cabins run by the state park near our home. They're overlooking the ocean,
Mm.
north of San Francisco. They're just unreal. They're like out of some sort of an advertisement. Actually, they get used in advertisements all the time. But anyway, one of them became available, which is really rare. And somehow we noticed it. And my wife jumped on it and got it. And like the next night, it was like a Tuesday night. We like picked my daughter up at 5 p.m. from school. We drove over to the cabin. We stayed the night, and then we hung out the next day. She skipped school. I mean, I say school, it's daycare. Um, but I was able to totally rearrange my schedule. I didn't have anything that I couldn't move around, and she had a random day off on a Wednesday because her schedule is random, and we were, out there on the coast. There was nobody around because it's a Wednesday, and we got this incredible cabin, and I just remember thinking to myself how lucky we are that we have the ability to do that at
Yeah.
times, and if we both worked, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, like, we could not have pulled that off. No
No,
way.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Now that you're doing more creative work, what would you say having this creative expression has brought to your life?
Mm. It's a good question. I mean, because I had tendencies before photography, creative tendencies, like there were elements of it in my life already, even before I started the business. So maybe I'll speak to just photography as a whole, like having a creative outlet as a whole. Obviously, it's more prevalent for me now, but I think for me, and this is pretty specific, but it allows me to see every piece of my life, like the most mundane, everyday things as beautiful and creative and artistic and something to pay attention to, something memorable. Um, I often walk around my house with a 35 millimeter film camera and don't take a lot of photos, but I will just see the way that, light is coming through a window and landing on a wall or on my daughter and snap a quick photo. And I think that awareness that's something I really value, and I value it because I fall out of it at times. I'll get really stuck in the building a website phase or whatever, the
Mhm.
computer technical side of my business, and I'll spend a month doing that, and I'll totally forget it. You know, um, my office is in a little cabin up the hill. I'll walk up to my office and sit down and realize, like, I didn't even listen. Like, I didn't hear any birds. I wasn't paying any
Mhm.
attention. But at my best, and photography helps me be my best, that walk up the hill is totally different. Like I walk out of my house and I'm aware of what's going on around me, the light, the sounds, the smells. And so I think having a creative outlet potentially brings that kind of to your everyday life. It's just a more playful, um, in touch way of living.
Yeah, I think you're talking about connection, like being
Yeah.
connected to your environment. You're connected to your experience. You're visually connecting to things. Like we tend to not do that because we're living in such a distracted world right now. And I did visit your Instagram and you're like, I'm not really on here. Like it says it in your bio. And I was like, yep, that's kind of where I am because I just feel like we're missing out on things. And What you're talking about reminds me of, actually, ironically, something I did see on Instagram, but it's about having what they call a noticing walk every day. It's like doing a walk where you consciously try and notice things you've never noticed before, even if you're walking the same walk every single day.
I have to yeah, I have to jump in and say, because this makes me think of something that I started doing this year that my wife definitely rolls her eyes at daily, but I demanded that we buy 2 of those. I'm trying to think what they're called, 5-year journals. It's like,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, it's like you enter you write 3 or 4 lines for the day, and then the next year you enter the 3 or 4 lines for that day right below it. So in 5 years, you can look back at the last 5 years on that date. Anyway, I had her buy me one as a Christmas present, one for our daughter, which that makes sense, but one for our garden. And we don't have much of a garden yet, but it's something I'm really dedicated to building out over the next few years. But I'm making it my mission this year and, well, for the next 5 years, to go outside every day and just sit for
Mhm.
5 minutes in the same place in that little garden and try to observe and write down different things that I'm seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, whatever. Kind of very similar. It's like the
Mhm.
same space, and it's challenging to come up with something new some days, but other days you walk out there and your awareness is open and it's like a whole new world. So anyway, I'm trying to, yeah, kind of make that happen every day.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that, and I tend to walk the same route most days, like this little 2 kilometer, just over a mile walk, and there's just so much to see on it, and it's like, I feel like we're so insular, and I feel like this is the antidote to being insular and disconnected.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are very, very disconnected from our environment. I've made some friends in this new area we live in who go and forage for mushrooms,
Mhm,
and I've
mhm.
gotten at least intrigued about it myself. I literally haven't eaten a single mushroom that I picked, but I'm now aware of them. And I go out with my daughter, and she's, even at 2.5, she's super into mushrooms, super into seeing them. And it's completely transformed the way I walk through the woods during mushroom season. Like, I am just eyes on the ground and in the trees, and I'm listening, and she's looking, and it's crazy. It totally transforms the way we think.
Do you know how good that is for your eyesight as well? Like, actually your physical eyesight? I've been learning about, like, how our eyes are working and, awareness, and all of that is connected, and not noticing things and not being expansive with our, like, physical vision actually affects us physically and also just everything. So,
That's super interesting. I
yeah,
hadn't thought
one's
about it that way,
oh,
yeah.
yeah, and, that's a whole rabbit hole I'm going down, but,
Yeah.
what would you say some of your clients say about you when they work with you, like in terms of how you work and your process and what it's like for them?
The thing that sticks with me the most is, um, I've had, gosh, over the years, uh, at least 20, if not more, clients text message me immediately after the session, like while they're driving home, that their kids are asking, if I'm coming home with them, why I'm not in the car with them, when they get to have their next adventure with me, something along those lines. And even the next day, they'll text me and be like, my son woke up asking where David was. And that, I don't know exactly what that says, but it feels like the highest compliment that I was able to, in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, gain the trust of this kid that I've never hung out with before while photographing them. But I know that that level of trust
Mhm.
leads to meaningful pictures, because a meaningful picture, that's the key ingredient. If I can walk into a family's home or go out on a hike with them and they are in their element and they are doing their thing, they are feeling like themselves, like, my job's super easy. I just take a bunch of pictures and, yeah, I try to get in good light or whatever, but they're going to love their photos no matter what, because it shows them feeling like they are comfortable and at ease and happy. And that's what people want and need. So when a kid, and this has been true for various ages, but when a kid reaches that level of trust with me within, an hour, hour and a half, I think that's the thing that tells me the most about the type of experience I'm creating.
Mhm. It's like such a genuine connection, and I do
Yeah.
think that shows through in the photos because, as I said, they look really, not just natural, but, they're very purposeful, or they feel like they're really bringing some life to the table, and That is a compliment, and not every photographer can bring that to the table. And how amazing would it be if we could all bring such genuine connection and passion to our jobs and our work that we're doing? And that's why I love having these conversations, is because there's so many of us that are not doing that. And I want this to inspire others to try and find that. Like, it must feel amazing at the end of the day to get that text, see your photographs, and be like, that was a good day's work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it comes from like we have these labels we put on photographers or portrait photographers like lifestyle or documentary, and I don't really love any of them that much. I,
Mm,
I tend to describe my style as interactive, meaning like on the best day, on most days, I'm out with a family that has kids that are similar ages to mine. We've been through, we have common ground. And I'm just out there having a good time with them, interacting with them, talking, finding that common ground and having good conversations with the parents, with the kids. And I'm photographing along the way, but it becomes part of the process. I'm literally telling them, I'm like, oh, I'm seeing beautiful light over here. I'm explaining what I'm looking for in terms of front light and backlight, all while we're talking about parenting or the kids are climbing a rock. So the photography becomes something that we're all doing together and it becomes part of the conversation. The sessions, and we all have these that don't feel as connected, are usually the ones where, and this doesn't happen a lot because I have a lot of words on my website to steer these folks to other photographers, but when the parents show up and they have created this like container around photography. They're like,
mhm.
this is photography. We are doing photography now. And this is the photographer, do as the photographer says. And like, that is not how I work
Yeah.
at all, because that separates what we're doing from where we are. So, yeah, I think putting all those pieces together is what puts people at ease.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not every kid wants that Sears photo, right? Where you're just like forced into posing, and especially children. I
No,
mean, I don't want to do that. Like
no,
that sounds like a total nightmare to me.
no. And it's not the
So,
picture I want of my
yeah.
family
Yeah.
either. So,
No, that's exactly it. Okay, so I have a question that I ask all the guests, and that is, in the spirit of helping people ditch the struggle, what do you feel is most important to commit to?
um, yeah, I think struggle like feels like the key word to me because, um, I don't think life is about reducing the work we put in. I work really hard. I live in this old home in the woods that needs a ton of work. I've got a kid. We may have another kid. Like we all have whatever's going on in our life, but I work really hard. It used to feel like a struggle, but it doesn't feel like a struggle anymore. Ever since I created the Enloe Creative, started photographing families here in the Bay Area, it has felt like my work is aligned with my life in a way that every bit of energy that I put into it is energy that I put into my life. And so, kind of to sum that up, is I think committing to learning yourself and your values, and we talked a lot about this, but committing to learning yourself and your values and then building a business or at least bouncing every business decision off of those values, running it through that filter. It's a long game. It That's a slow version of growth, but it's gonna lead somewhere that you love, somewhere that where your work is aligned with your life. I've heard people say, try to create a life that you don't need a vacation from, and
Mhm.
that has always stuck with me. Try to create a job that I don't need a vacation from.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also in the same camp. I love working hard. I just don't want to struggle. To me, the struggle is like the friction piece where you're not aligned to the values. You're like trying to be someone you're not. You're in the wrong environment. You're working with people you don't like. The work doesn't light you up at all, at all. But the hard work is just like, I know what I want to do. I'm enjoying this. It feels like purposeful. It feels like, for me, I really have to feel like I'm contributing something, that it's of value, that kind of lights me up. And then it doesn't feel like a struggle anymore. It just feels like, okay, this is rolling up my sleeves. I don't want a easy life. I just want a like purposeful and fulfilling life.
I wrote an email newsletter titled something like that the other day, like, the last thing I wanna say about my life is that was easy. Like, I'm not looking
Yes.
for
Yeah.
easy, I'm
Yeah.
looking for good. I'm looking for enjoyable, fulfilling, meaningful, all those things. So, yeah, I think looking at values is really a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great reminder, this conversation, to look at our values. It's made me reflect on mine a little bit more. And I know our listeners will be doing the same. So thank you, David. I have loved this conversation today.
I've loved it as well. Thank you so much for having me
Oh,
on.
before we go, though, just let everyone know where they can find you. And again, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. My website is the best place to reach me, and to take a look at my work and also to connect. As you mentioned, I'm essentially not on social media. So if you just scroll down on my homepage for the Enloe Creative, you will find a place to join my newsletter. And I send out semi-weekly, really thoughtful, heartfelt messages about parenting and photography and kind of the way those intersect. Things that sound a lot like this conversation. So,
Amazing. I love it. And also love that you're not so much on the social media, as I haven't
yeah,
been too much these days too. And I'm seeing the swing. People are really, putting more time and energy into the newsletter. So they're having more of the personal connection and it's more meaningful. So thank you.
absolutely.
We will find you. And thanks for sharing your story today, David.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. Be sure to follow this podcast, visit alanarosa.com, and of course, share it so we can build each other up. And before I go, remember to be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.